Usually in my home kitchen, I like to use the French method for making macarons, and a couple months ago, I shared how to make the Italian method for macarons, and today, just in case those aren't working out for you, I want to share the Swiss method for macaron shells, and I'm just going to keep them white and a little bit of white food colorant in here. The biggest difference here is really just with that beginning stage with the meringue. Any Swiss meringue starts off with and needs a double boiler, so a little bit of water in your saucepan, have your sugar, and then all of the egg whites will go into the top bowl portion of your double boiler, and then that's going to go on to kind of a medium-low heat. So you want the water in the bottom to be at kind of a very gentle simmer. Meanwhile, you can whisk the sugar and egg whites in the top there. If you want to add in any colorant, you can absolutely add it in right now. And then this, right now, if you put your finger in there, it would be room temperature. The sugar would feel a bit grainy. The egg whites are still pretty globby and gross. So this is going to cook until it is kind of hot to the touch, but not scalding. We don't want to completely cook it here. When you put your finger in there, you shouldn't feel any of the grains of sugar, and the egg white should have completely liquefied. And once you get to that stage, you can transfer it over either to your stand mixer and whip it to stiff peaks just like you would any other meringue, or you can, if you're using a hand mixer, you can either keep it in that same bowl or transfer it to a new one. Again, you're just looking for stiff peaks. This differs from the French method, which doesn't use any heat. You just have your egg whites and you stream in your sugar just the way it is, and then whip to a stiff peak. And in the Italian method, if you remember that, you are using a tiny bit of water and bringing the water and sugar to 118 degrees Celsius, streaming it into half of your whipping egg whites, and then half of the other whites are mixed in to make a paste with your dry ingredients. So the Italian method and the French method are very, very different from each other, and the Swiss method I feel like is kind of an in-between of those two versions. It does include heating up the sugar and egg whites, but it doesn't do anything different with your dry ingredients. So from this point out, if you've seen any of my other videos or tutorials where I'm making macarons, it is the same process. I'm going to be adding in my dry ingredients for this size of batch in about 3 additions here. I like to transfer out my meringue to a larger, wider bowl, not just for filming, but I do this anyway because I like to have a better visualization of what's going on, if there are any pockets of dry ingredients, all that kind of stuff. The dry ingredients, of course, are the almond flour and powdered sugar that you can food process and or sift. Personally, I just like to sift them together and just make sure that they are combined and don't have any big lumps before you start mixing them into the meringue. Whatever you do, however you choose to get to this stage, whether you're using the Swiss meringue method with that double boiler and heating up the egg whites and sugar, if you're using a French method, if you're using the Italian method, once you arrive at this stage when all the ingredients are in the same bowl finally, from this point on, you're doing the exact same thing. So the biggest difference is what works best for you in the beginning. And depending on where you are, what your kitchen is like, how many macs you're making, you might have different answers to that. So it really, I think, is a good idea to play around with which method you like best for you, for your kitchen, for your needs, all of that. So from here on out, I am just using my spatula to move the batter around my bowl, kind of pressing it against the sides, folding it over onto itself, scraping the sides to make sure nothing is left out. This is called the macaronage, or the mixing process for the batter, and the purpose here is to deflate some of the air that got incorporated into the meringue. I know it seems very counterintuitive that we spent so much time making a stiff peak only to deflate the air, but that's the process. So I'm just deflating enough air so that when I lift my spatula up, it will stream down, the batter will stream down like a ribbon back into the bowl. What we don't want is to pick our spatula up and just have it clumpy and not really falling off of there. We also don't want this to be too runny. So this can be a really tricky thing to figure out and to work on. And the macaronage process is usually what a lot of people get stuck on. If you haven't checked out some of my other videos, I have a lot of what if I macaron fail kind of tutorials or explanations. So if you are feeling stuck there, absolutely check those out. See if you can find out what is going wrong at that stage in your process. Back to these Swiss method macaron shells, I have my piping tip here. I have all my batter in my piping bag, piping onto my silpat. I personally really like to use any number of piping tips between an 803 and like an 806. In general, I would say I probably gravitate towards the 804 most of the time, but depending on your style and your hand and your everything, you may want to use a different style or a size of piping tip, and that is totally okay too. I like to tap my trays just a little bit, but it is important that you aren't completely going crazy tapping the bottom. So you want to make sure that you're leaving yourself relatively smooth tops. And you can see by my wrist motion there, I'm kind of trying to cut off the very tops of the shell so I don't have any pointy things that will need extra effort to smooth down. Just like any other macaron shell, I'm letting these rest until they form that skin on the top of the shell, and then into my oven they go one tray at a time to bake for about 16 to 18 minutes, and then I will let them cool completely before removing the shells from their trays and matching them up. I hope you enjoyed this little look at Swiss method, using the Swiss method for macaron shells. If you are struggling in any way with your macarons or just want to try something new, I think it's always fun to play around with different formats and different methods in your kitchen. So I hope you give this a try if you're looking for something a little bit different. If you're not already subscribed here or following me on Instagram at Maddie Brame, I love to see you. I post new tutorials and YouTube videos every Sunday and Thursday, and way more behind the scenes up over on my Instagram account. So definitely subscribe and follow if you're not already. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.